malalandaan po yan. But we just came from another small cabinet cluster meeting on that. I just simply would wish to highlight a few things here when you say transformation and tradition, in the very spirit of what the NCPAC stands for and what it has in many of these years contributed to nation building over and beyond the campus confines of the University of the Philippines. And coming from where I sit now in the office of the President and with the Laguna Lake Development Authority, I simply look at this in terms really of the larger challenges on ecological governance, and I use the ecological operative term deliberately more than environmental, because when we speak of ecology, we don't speak just of land, air, water, forests, seas, rivers. We just don't speak of natural resources or extractive industries like logging or mining, etc. But we're really talking about the environment interacting with population, with demographic realities, and the interactions as well with technology, and the interactions with, and for NCPAC, with governance, with the managing of all of these resources and the institutional arrangements that we need to be put in place, whether it's the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, the Solid Waste Management Act, the Executive Order on Mining Policy, etc., etc., vis-a-vis everything that has to do with social impacts, with climate change impacts, with poverty reduction, with job creation, with the economy, with economic indices, etc. So all of that come together in what we broadly refer to as ecology. And because governance is key in the managing towards a balance of economy and ecology and reaching sustainability, as the recent Rio Plus 20 summit yet again put forward, then it behooves us all to return and ask what exactly, especially for the Philippines, we all must, and those of us in this forefront, must really address and focus on. So, let me just begin with even just the word governance. It comes from the Latin, or from Old French, gouverneur, which actually is in reference to a central rotor of any kind of a gadget that makes that gadget or that contraption functional. So if an electric fan's governor, the one that is the rotor, its back, is the one that makes the fan spin, then that is the functionality of that electric fan, and that rotor at the back is the governor. And that's where governance comes from. So governance, public management, public administration, in terms of the larger range of ecological challenges, really have to do with finding that rotor that balances all of what we talk about. The environment, land, air, water, seas, forests, population, demographic expansion, technology, new technology, and all of what comes with it, including pollution and the externalities that economists would refer to, and that's why we have to talk about pollution abatement, etc. But bringing that all together, what is the function of the MMDA, the DNR, the LLDA, the DILG, the DOH, all of these, vis-a-vis civil society, academia, etc. So ecology is really, and ecological governance is really a key driver of the new kind of challenges that not only Rio Plus 20 and the climate change talks in Durban and previous to that, and all of the other international summits and conventions, etc., but even for local governments in countries like ours are really pushing forward. Yes, it's about enforcement. Yes, it's about making sure that there's proper implementation of environmental laws. But what we would like to keep pushing for in a new arena, really, where everything has, of course this is my bias, but I'd like to see it always from the prism of everything that has to do with sustaining our life support systems. Because I always say, and we always say, if you cannot take care of the ecology, there is no economy to speak of, because it comes from the same root word, oikos, whole. The old Greek oikos, whole. The basic unit of any economic exchange, consumption, distribution, etc. is the whole. So the national economy is the national whole. The global economy is the global whole. But the oikos, that is also the root word for ecology, is the planetary whole. It is all of what nurtures us. And when we were campaigning with the President in 2010, we said as we went around that tuwid na daan should also be about tuwid na daan sa lumpiang paraan. And when we went up to Isabela and Sierra Madre and elsewhere and saw the massive devastation of our last remaining forests, primary growth forests, we came up with this call: no forests, no watersheds. No watersheds, no water. No water, no rice. No rice, no food. And likewise, no watersheds, no water for Mindanao. No water, no energy. No energy, no economy. So the economy is a subsidiary of the ecology and not the other way around. And so when we look at all of how we govern and put together all of these challenges now in this day and age of a warming planet and the impacts and the high vulnerability of many of our communities to climate change and the need for adaptation, we are seeing how critical this front is for ecological governance. Enforcement and implementation are key, but how do we drive this? We drive it, as we say, with metrics and with maps. And that has to not just be with the DNR or the MDA or the LMDA or other environmental agencies of government. These have to also be across the entire spectrum of the bureaucracy. This has to also go across all sectors of society. Because as we say, if you cannot protect and sustain life support systems, clean air, clean water, the management for future generations of our scarce resources, then we stand the risk of losing what it is that gives us, in the first place, the economy. Okay. So metrics and maps. Why? Because in public management, as NCPAG would know all too well, we cannot manage or govern that which we could not measure. And we cannot monitor whether air, water, solid waste, the lakes, the rivers, the forests, and the seas, or whatnot. You cannot map that, you cannot monitor that which you cannot map. And so the thrust that we're trying to really get our present administration moving towards is putting in place across all of these agencies of government the need for real metrics and indices. Whether it is on environmental sustainability, or vulnerability, or risk assessment, or inventories of our fish stock, or our coastal resources, of land use, etc. And what we really need to do here is to make sure that across all of our agencies of government, there is clearer coordination, because what we really need is for NAMRIA, the National Mapping Authority, to work closely with DND for disaster risk reduction, to work closely with DOH, with DepEd, with Department of Environment, with DILG, not just with the DNR, so that we really see where our metrics are and how best we should move forward based on clear, scientifically sound, and empirically based data. And with that, also the clarity of our maps, whether they're geohazard maps or the more sophisticated satellite images that is now 1:10,000 or 1:5,000, which also can function beyond just environmental planning, and land use and such concerns can also be used even for tax planning, even for the monitoring of down to prisons for voting. So it becomes also multi-use. But the challenge is to ensure that we understand what we're measuring so we manage properly, and that we can hold accountable, in fact, agencies and local governments, because we are dealing with a fundamentally uniform and sound empirically based data sets. And one example we're moving towards in partnership with the World Bank, for instance, and other multilateral agencies, is what we call the WAVES program. Wealth, Accounting, and Valuation of Ecosystem Services, which is an expanded concept or tool now of the payment for ecosystem services. So it's not just enough that we measure how much of the forests are left, or the seas, or the river basins, and the land, etc. We're really also going to move towards the understanding of how much, if we can put the value to clean air, to clean water, how much is that? So that we can actually bring ecology and economy into a clearer discourse where everyone can get on board. Because as we realize in the Cabinet Cluster for Climate Change and the Environment, we cannot use the entry point of, you know what, we really have to save the environment, we really have to protect it, we really have to make sure that Mindanao has adequate forests so that the watersheds will always have the water for the hydroelectric energy, etc., etc. So we will have still sustainable economies. Because beyond that, we have to see what it is that we can all come together and value, because we cannot keep saying, because it's just we love the earth, because we're green. We have to now bring into the table of policy making and governance the very idea of how much does it cost to keep this forest, so that you are able, in a total or more expansive valuation, see if you keep this forest, how much of food security and water security is guaranteed, as opposed to saying, let's mine around or even in this forest. How much will that cost? These are what we mean by metrics and maps as effective or more effective tools for public governance. And these are what we hope consciousness in the general public, but now especially for government, will lead towards. Because it is not enough that we say, basta may pera, may investment, may trabaho, dun tayo. Because the ecological governance framework will ask, may employment na, may trabaho na, may investment na, may pera na, pero magkano naman ang mawawala kung ang Sierra Madre ay tuluyan ng over, at lahat na lang ng protected areas ay may pagniningan na rin. Saan din tayo? Where is the economy if the ecology is largely diminished? So these are these challenges, and I'd like to just offer them as food for thought, but just to tell you that these are what goes on in some of the cabinet cluster meetings, so that whether it's for Rio +20 or for the Climate Action Plan, which the President signed in November of last year, it is the first of its kind in the region, where the Philippines now has a national climate change action plan for adaptation and longer-term mitigation. 18 years, a spread of 3 presidencies,